Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody's refreshed, everybody's enjoyed a good cup of tea or coffee, hopefully over some good conversation and good company. With that, we will segue into the last professional session of IPRD 2025. We have an excellent lineup of speakers. Please join me in welcoming each one of them as I invite them on stage. Mr. Raj Mohabeer, Mr. Ristian Atriandi Suprianto, Miss Sylvia Malian-Boom, and Miss Grace Fuller. Ladies and gentlemen, please give them a big hand as they join us on stage. And as the moderator for this session, we have the illustrious, His Excellency, Mr. Sanjiv Ranjan. Let's keep the applause going, ladies and gentlemen, the last session. With all the panelists on stage, I now hand over the proceedings to the session chair. Sir, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you. It's really a very great honor for me to moderate this session on the IONS, IORA, IOC, AOIP interface at the 2025 edition of the Indo-Pacific Regional Dialogue. I'm also very grateful to the Indian Navy and the National Maritime Foundation for this invitation to participate in this prestigious dialogue that has, for me, this is my first dialogue that I'm attending, and I'm hugely impressed with the dialogue and the conversations that have taken place over the past 3 days. It is really something which brings together policymakers, practitioners, strategists, academicians from across the Indo-Pacific region to deliberate upon issues of concern to all of us. The challenge really for me is to moderate this session, which happens to be the last session, and hope to keep you awake and hope to make it as fast and efficient and effective as possible. This year's theme of the dialogue, promoting holistic maritime security and growth, regional capacity building and capability enhancement is timely and, as was mentioned, prescient, that it captures the central challenges of our times and the opportunities that it also presents. How to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains secure, stable, prosperous, through collective capacity, shared responsibility, and mutual growth. Let me just preface my remarks by saying that after a few remarks on the overall theme of the session, I will then pass on the floor to each of the panelists for about 20 minutes, followed by the question and answer session. Let me begin with a brief reflection of the organization which I represent as the Secretary General of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. It was established in 1997. It is composed of 23 member states and 12 dialogue partners, primarily to promote cooperation across the region. And over the existence of this organization over 3 decades, it has turned into a credible and a respected platform for dialogue and action on maritime safety, maritime development, and sustainability. In today's changing global context, IORA has expanded its engagement to the wider Indo-Pacific, and as late as November 2022, it adopted an outlook on the Indo-Pacific, which recognizes that the Indian and the Pacific Ocean forms a single, continuous, and interlinked maritime space. It also outlines IORA's vision of an open, inclusive, and rules-based Indo-Pacific, grounded in international law, especially the 1982 Convention, UNCLOS, And it also seeks to promote cooperation based on sovereign equality, mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and shared benefit. Our priorities, the organization's priorities, are in close alignment with the theme of this dialogue, as our work focuses on maritime safety and security, trade and investment facilitation, fisheries management, disaster risk management, academic science and technology cooperation, blue economy, women economic empowerment, all priority elements of work which are in synchronicity with IORA's vision of a peaceful and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Ensuring maritime safety and security in the IORA region involves, as we have heard over the past 2 days, as well as today, the several traditional and non-traditional safety and security challenges that we have to confront on a daily basis. In terms of functioning modality, the organization has a working group on maritime safety and security. It's composed of all the 23 member states of the organization, and it is currently chaired by Australia, with India as a coordinating country. They oversee the work of the organization in the field of maritime safety and security. The work plan which guides the work of this body of the organization focuses on 4 areas: search and rescue, maritime crime, information sharing, and maritime partnerships. Through the working group platform, IORA coordinates all matters pertaining to this area, including capacity building and practical cooperation. I believe that this working group could also benefit from IONS's experience in maritime operations and from IOC's strong record in maritime governance and disaster management. Distinguished participants, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, this session focuses on the IONS, IORA, and the IOC and AOIP, and each of these bring distinctive strengths to the work of maritime safety and security. Together, these initiatives form a complementary and mutually reinforcing architecture. Working in synergy, they can help us build a more coherent and effective approach to maritime security, including environmental protection, blue economy, and disaster resilience. The IPOI, the India's initiative, which was launched in 2019, provides an additional structure through its 7 interlinked pillars. Other approaches which we have heard about, like African Union's 2050 Integrated Maritime Strategy or the EU Strategy for Cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, all highlight similar goals: cooperation, inclusivity, and a stable maritime domain. This, in a sense, reflects a growing regional consensus that security and development have to go hand in hand. Following the adoption of the IORA's outlook on the Indo-Pacific, the member states are working on trying to develop a roadmap for its implementation. I believe that the synergy that IONS, IORA, IOC, and AOIP present can help turn shared principles into concrete actions for improving marine domain awareness, enhancing search and rescue operations, developing blue economy projects, managing disasters, and building capacities across the region, in particular for small island and coastal states. Functionally, IORA and the Indian Ocean Commission are already working together in select areas after concluding a memorandum of understanding in February 2022. We hope to replicate similar cooperation with ASEAN under the rubric of an MOU which was concluded between the 2 organizations in September 2022, and hopefully deepen cooperation and coordination in our work. Ladies and gentlemen, as we look ahead, IORA believes that the future of the Indo-Pacific must be guided by cooperation over competition and inclusivity over division. Our common goal is simple yet profound: to ensure that the Indo-Pacific remains a region of peace, shared prosperity, and sustainable growth. We at the IORA Secretariat stand ready to continue working closely with all these organizations and all other partners to strengthen cooperation, share best practices, and ensure that no member state is left behind. I look forward, obviously, to hearing the valuable insights and recommendations of the panelists and other participants in this session. It is now my privilege to introduce our distinguished panel of speakers for this important session. Today we have 4 esteemed speakers who will provide unique perspectives on regional cooperation, scientific collaboration, and synergies in the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific region. We will begin with Mr. Raj Mohabeer, officer in charge of the General Secretariat of the Indian Ocean Commission, based in Mauritius. Mr. Mohabeer will share IOC's perspective on enhancing synergy among the 3 and drawing from the Commission's experience in promoting maritime governance, capacity building, and sustainable development in the Western Indian Ocean. Next, we will hear from Mr. Ristian Astriandi Supriyanto from the University of Indonesia, who will provide an Indonesian perspective on synergizing IORA, IONS, and the AOIP. He will highlight Indonesia's vision of inclusivity, dialogue, and cooperation under the AOIP framework. Our third speaker is Sylvia Mallenbaum, Head of India and South Asia Research at the Center for Asian Studies, and she will present the French perspective on synergizing IOC, IORA, and IONS, focusing in particular on France's engagement in the Indo-Pacific and its commitment to promoting maritime security and multilateral cooperation. Our final speaker, Ms. Grace Fuller, First Secretary at the Australian High Commission here in Delhi, will also share Australia's perspective on strengthening collaboration among these 3 organizations, and particularly through practical policy-oriented capacity building initiatives across the Indo-Pacific. After the presentations, as I mentioned earlier, we will have the question-answer sessions. With that, it gives me great pleasure to invite our first speaker, Mr. Raj Mohabeer, to deliver his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, SG. The chairman, DG, and the whole staff of NMF, it's a real pleasure for me to be together with you for the 4th time. And I'm indeed very much abhari. But you know, every time I come, I have such a warm welcome and all facilities for me. I'm very sorry that I have a small problem with my voice because I'm highly asthmatic and I have been disturbing a few of you by coughing now and then. I will try to make some proposals, and I think it's very timely in the sense that the issue of IOC, IONS, and IORA aligning and working together is indeed very timely. As was very well said by the chair, India will be chairing IORA next year. Australia, with which we have very excellent relationship, are chairing right now. And we believe that it's high time that we stop multiplying processes and mechanisms, but we try to see how we can make the best from existing mechanisms and institutions and work together. Now, on top of IORA, IONS, and IOC, so just to say that when I'm speaking of IOC, I'm speaking of what we have tried to establish, which is the Regional Maritime Security Architecture. It is led by the IOC. It has been conceived, developed, and implemented, but it is not an IOC per se regional mechanism. It's a mechanism that tries to adhere as many neighboring countries as many possible. So that's IOC's perspective. And then we have, of course, IONS and IORA. Now with IORA, the SG of IORA, he has already mentioned that we already have an MOU. It means that we have discussed already what are the things on which we'll be working, and maritime security is one amongst the priority areas on which we'll be working. The issue now is, what do we do? Are we really working together? That's the question. And what are the concrete elements on how we can be working together? And this is where I'll be making some suggestions, concrete ones. Now, I have mentioned this DCUC, because if you look at this DCUC, those who have been involved in this DCUC will know that there are 22 states of the Western Indian Ocean. And they are working, and in fact, they are trying to do the same thing, similar things, establishing a mechanism for the region to address maritime security threats and issues. With this DCUC, we already have an understanding as well that the DCUC will not establish regional centers, that we will be working together. And this is already on the way. Now, what would be the details of how we'd work? That is something we'll be discussing eventually. I've mentioned SEJIMA because I am, in fact, the secretariat for the contact group. As you know, previously it was CGCPS, now SEJIMA. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that the alignment, working together, is not an option. It is imperative. And this is where I'm repeating myself again, that the new chair of IORA next year, I expect that there will be some new impetus that will be provided in this collaboration together with everyone. Now, what I'll do is that first, you know, when we're talking about maritime security, we have a list of different maritime security challenges and threats. And I believe that for each of the threats, we need to get an understanding of what concretely we need to do. I won't go into the details on this one right now. Suffice to say that the RMSA, according to the agreements that have been signed, it covers 28 million square kilometers of the Western Indian Ocean region, while the Indian Ocean is more than 70 million square kilometers, which means then that the RMSA, this is what it is, the whole setup. The RMSA has its scope within the red line, knowing very well that all the threats and the challenges come from far away, from everywhere. It means then that the objective of the RMSA, which is trying to establish and operationalize a regional, minimal maritime capability in the region, we will not achieve it alone. We'll need the wider Indian Ocean region. For the time being, in this slide, it summarizes the whole mechanism, also the surface and air assets that are viable for actions at sea. And in fact, this is a unique architecture. It doesn't exist anywhere. A group of countries working together, not just sharing information, but also going after those who are doing things. And in fact, I will come with a few examples of what I'm suggesting. Now, RMSA, the idea, in fact, has been floated, was floated. If you look very closely of the EZs of the countries that have signed the RMSA, the two agreements, look very closely, you'll find that the EZ of one country is neighboring the EZ of another country. In other words, if we all work together, knowing very well that the capability is limited individually, but by being together, we can make a big difference, and this is what it is about. Now, these are the proposals for us to be working together. The IOC, we are leading and supporting the implementation of the RMSA together with the two regional centers that was mentioned yesterday, the Regional Maritime Fusion Center and the Regional Coordination Operations Center. With IORA being an organization that groups most, if not all, the neighboring surrounding Indian Ocean countries, the idea would be that more and more neighboring countries would join the RMSA to work on these. not necessarily to join. But a few things like these are, each of them, the most important, crucial thing. For example, when we're talking about HR, what does mean HR? Means that we have people who are capable of using the various MDA tools to understand what is happening to the movement of vessels at sea. Who is doing what? Do we have national centers? Do we have sufficient number of capable officials who can look at that? So the idea would be, why don't we mobilize actors like IFC IOR, India, other partners, to train to have at least something like 10 to 20 officers who are able to use that. Second, that various tools, the MDA tools are still in the hands of private sector or major developed countries. It's not accessible to the developing countries in the region. This is a major issue. It's a very important major issue. We're talking about AI, okay, but then which country in our region can, and I'll give you a few examples on what I'm talking about. I won't go on each of these, because each of these would require I go deep down in the details of what I mean and understand on them and what would mean. Suffice to say that these are areas on which I would be very much willing to sit together with SG IORA and also the organizers of the next session of IONS, which I understand will be held in Mauritius. The Minister for Foreign Affairs told me that he is already agreeable to host it, and then we prepare that. So during the sessions on IORA, on IORA, we say, okay, how can we see to it that all the countries do have a certain number of competent, fully capable of using every single MDA tools, that they are sufficiently trained. But then on IONS, we'll put questions on the table. And let me give you a few questions. See, I've been hearing about IU fishing since I started working on maritime security. Now, who can give me the exact estimate of IU fishing in the Indian Ocean? Everyone talks. Now, okay, we can't give. Fine. Then let's take it differently. In Mauritius, we know how many, how many all sorts of criminals we arrest in every country. So my question to you is, how many IU fishers have each of the countries in the Western Indian Ocean region, including the other countries, have we shoot? You'll be surprised. Go and look for these statistics. You want what? Why? So IONS, we have all these people coming. Let's put on the table, why is it that IT, new tools, are not accessible to the countries? Why is it that countries are not able to arrest and shoot IU fishers? Concrete questions which then will enable to discuss, agree, and then eventually get things done. So for example, I've been talking to Australia, and I've asked Australia, for example, we are having a meeting this month, on the 17th to 19th of November in Dhaka, to look at the different various MDA tools and how do we see to it that all these different tools are being then put on the table, where how can we ensure that these are mastered well by the officers, concerned officers in all the countries, that the centers are established, etc., etc. This is the kind of things we need to do. We need to see to it that the limited resources that all of us we have are put to the best use, but working together in complementarity, in coherence, and according to particular objectives. Now, I will try to give you a few examples on what I think we should be doing. Let's not try to do everything. This is what here. This is a Sayamaha Bank. In fact, it is an area which we call the Joint Management Area of Mauritius and Seychelles. Why I'm showing you that? Because this area is shallow. It's a continental shelf extension. That's where Mauritius and Seychelles jointly, have got this 396 square kilometers of continental shelf. Now, because it's shallow, there are many dark rendezvous. We focus the AIS in that region. Just in a matter of 1 month, we found so many infractions. All of these infractions, according to IMO rules, were there. There were even, tankers there, staying for months. What are they doing? All sorts of things, transshipment of fish, all sorts of things, including, and one we even followed it, there were even exchange of human trafficking there. So, should we not be working, saying the Indian Ocean, we secure, okay, let's work out all these hotspots, just like this one, all these hotspots. Let's identify all the hotspots there. And during the IONS, we present it. Why can't we do that? We have to shift from where we are just talking to another level where the talks that we will have will get us to get things done. And I'll show you a few of the things that we will do. This is a seizure of drugs, not by a Coast Guard or Navy from the country of the region, but from UK vessel. These are the actual pictures of that. Nearly 1 ton of drug. Now, this is another one. The dates are there. This is Seychelles, the biggest seizure of drugs that was done. Now, when we are talking about, and you remember I told you that we need to have a strategy for each of the maritime threats and issues that we have. So on drugs, for example, here, this one, we followed, at one point in time, there were at least 3 boats with over 1 ton of drugs that were going. You'll find the route that these took. Those were taken, and finally, none of the signatories of the RMSA arrested any of those 3. We couldn't. We do not have the capacity to monitor each of them. But then we alerted neighboring countries, including Sri Lanka and Mozambique, which are not signatories of the RMSA. This was arrested. One of the transfer of drugs that was done, this is a Sri Lankan vessel that arrested that drug. In fact, Sri Lanka arrested 2 vessels, not those which brought the drugs, but other vessels, those who took it. Sri Lanka did, and these are the actual pictures, and not just Mozambique also did. That's what the point I'm making here is that you don't need to be a signatory of the RMSA to be cooperating and working together. When you're trying to get things done, try to address drug trafficking, knowing very well that 90%, 95%, maybe 99% of the drugs are trafficked through the sea. Let's close that door through the sea. Let's do that. So let's get the competence to do that with the tools that we would need, we don't have right now. So now, this was, you see, between 16th May to 13th of June to 2025. We followed it. 3 seizures were done. These were the routes that those 3 took. Now this one is just last week. This is in Mombasa. One of the 3 which came, which delivered the drugs here and there, came again. And this time, we arrested it. And this is the actual packets that were in the boat, and the boat we can see behind. That's what it is about. What I'm trying to say here is that we need to go to the end results, what we want to achieve. And this is where, how do we allocate what tasks to be done by RMSA by IORA and by IONS. Let's discuss this. And I'll give a few examples again here, but I won't go into the details because I have only 2.5 minutes. Marine pollution. You remember when there was Wakasho in Mauritius 5 years ago? Now, what that showed, no single country can deal with marine pollution alone. So we have to have a strategy, collectively. And when Wakasho happened, India supported Mauritius, France supported Mauritius. It's not just the neighboring countries. So should we not work together? So think about that there is an IORA strategy for developing capacity for preparedness and resilience against marine pollution. So for example, we have white shipping, dark shipping. We have a list of the different various ships that go here and there. We monitor them, and we can monitor them. IU fishing. See, this one, every time I speak about it, I get nervous. Because I think there is too much hypocrisy and too much rhetoric on this. When I hear people say, IU fishing is a big problem, I even start getting nervous. We can stop IU fishing in the whole of the Indian Ocean in a matter of weeks. Surface, we have VMS systems, it exists, have national VMS system, have regional VMS system, IORA VMS. The whole of the Indian Ocean, you just get all the AISs, at least in our region, every country which give licenses to someone for fishing, that licensee is compelled to have its VMS on permanently, which gives 3 information: where the ship is, what it is fishing, how much. So if you have the whole, this one, I don't have time, I would have explained to you how it went. I have explained it in the past. This vessel was doing IU fishing, and when, they do it around the perimeters of the EZs. That's why I'm showing that. And when it was called to stop, says, no way, go away. Mauritius had to shoot 37 times before it understood that with Mauritians, you better stop. And then it stopped, and then it was shoot. What I'm trying to say is that we can stop it. Too much hypocrisy by governments and everyone. If we want to be serious, let's go. Let's stop talking. But then, okay, this is what I will put on the table together with IORA and IONS. These are just some pictures of IU fishing. These are actual pictures. 350 fishermen going from one country into a reserved island of another country. They were caught. It became a big issue. Even went to the heads of government and state talking to each other saying, okay, we'll deal with that. So that was my presentation. I'm saying, to summarize, that we need to go beyond the rhetorics and the talks, and talks that do not get us anywhere. Let's sit together. We are complement to each other, IORA, IONS, and IOC. We are ready. Are you? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mohabeer, for your insightful presentation. Your suggestions from RMSA to IORA through IONS are well noted, and your call to action is even more important. Your examples of interdiction were enlightening, whether it was for drug interdiction or whether it was IU fishing. Thank you very much. May I now request Mr. Ristrian Atriandi Supriyanto to provide the Indonesian perspective on the subject. Thank you.
Namaskar. Good afternoon, everyone. Privileged, humbled, and honored to be here to present an Indonesian perspective on Indian Ocean multilateralism on maritime security. I understand that this is just one Indonesian perspective, but there are many, multiple perspectives in Indonesia, perhaps similar to India, about this subject. So I would make the disclaimer here that my views only represent myself. It does not represent the institution I'm with, the University of Indonesia, nor the Indonesian government. Secondly, I would like to introduce myself first. So I'm a lecturer with the Department of International Relations, the University of Indonesia. So international relations talks, teaches, studies, researches, almost everything under the sun. So a lot of issues we cover as long as it goes beyond national boundaries. And University of Indonesia is one of the top universities in the country, and we are engaging with many partners, many of whom are represented, the countries are represented here, and we look forward to engaging more with all countries, especially with India. Having said that, I'm apologize in advance, so my condition is no better than the last speaker. So if I clear my throat during my speech, please forgive me. So when we talk about the Indian Ocean, I think you've seen this map quite often. It's a busy waterways. There are many waterways, but when you look at the eastern part of the Indian Ocean, they all coalesce or funnels into a corner. And that corner is Southeast Asia, right? So I think Indonesia, in this context, is quite a pivotal area for these sea lines of communications, for shipping traffic to transit between Indian Ocean and the Pacific Oceans, right? So Indonesia, like India also, is a major maritime crossroads. However, unlike India, Indonesia is a maritime archipelago. So this brings unique sets of priorities, unique sets of concerns and interests, right? So Indonesia has international maritime navigation passing through the middle of the countries. So this is quite a unique situation that few countries experience. I think Philippines is also in the same category, but less so because of the area that it covers. And many of these traffic, they become congested, I might say. They become crowded at certain locations. We call them choke points, right? So you have the Malacca Straits, Lombok Straits, Sunda Straits, and further east, there are also Ombai and Wata Straits. So Indonesia has to be responsible for the maritime security of these choke points, right? In addition to its territorial waters, including its massive exclusive economic zones. So this is a tremendous challenge for the country. And Indonesia, is still a developing state. So we need a lot of cooperation and even assistance from foreign partners in order to help us secure our maritime areas. However, I would like to echo the previous speaker from PNG that cooperation doesn't mean that we outsource responsibility. So responsibility remains with the Indonesian government, with Indonesian authorities in these areas. And when we talk about the maritime domain, right? So Indonesia has multiple policies. It has multiple strategies. So there is no single policy or strategy depending on the governments, depending on the leaders in power, right? Perhaps similar to any other democracies, right? So we have twists and turns in terms of how we think about maritime security and strategy. However, there are critical constants or principles when we devise, when we formulate maritime policies and strategies. So there are 4 of them. Number 1 is the realization that we are a maritime crossroads, really. I mean, literally, right, between the Indian and Pacific Oceans, because we are located along the shortest shipping routes among major ports in the Indo-Pacific. Number 2, we recognize that these maritime crossroads are transited by international navigation. Right? So I don't talk about freedom of navigation. Again, international navigation is something that Indonesia has to respect, but it is regulated. And we have all the rules, regulations, and laws, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea with regards to the transit rights of foreign vessels through the Indonesian archipelago. Right? So this is something that Indonesia is committed to respect. And indeed, Indonesia is an archipelagic state because of international law. Right? So the demise of international law, especially UNCLOS, will be the demise of Indonesia as an archipelagic state. So it is that important for Indonesia that UNCLOS remains the constitution of the oceans. And finally, this is where Indonesia is still facing challenges, is how to develop our maritime, our naval, our sea power in order to fulfill our responsibilities to provide maritime security and to collaborate more with our foreign partners. You know, if not within Indonesian territorial waters, then beyond, like in the high seas. Right? And one example of our maritime policy, again, this is policy, not a strategy, was the formulation and the adoption of the global maritime fulcrum concept. So that lasted under the previous administration for 10 years. It distilled all this, the 4 principles into 7 pillars, right? So it touches on marine and human resource development, which is blue economy, maritime security, safety law enforcement, ocean governance, maritime space management and marine protection, maritime culture, how we build ourselves as a seafaring nation rather than an agricultural focused nation, and finally, maritime diplomacy. And I think this is where we need to look at Indian Ocean multilateralism from. And this is a core pillar of Indonesian foreign policy, even after the global maritime concept is no longer the guiding principle of the current administration. So ASEAN is the medium, essentially, by which Indonesia projects its maritime diplomacy in the Indian Ocean, right? So ASEAN is the cornerstone of Indonesian foreign policy. It is a fundamental tenet, fundamental principle by which we design our foreign policy strategy and our security strategy. However, ASEAN is not the only one. And indeed, Indonesia has looked into other forms of multilateralism in the region, such as IORA, which Indonesia has been present since inception in 1997, IONS, Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, but increasingly there are also other forms of multilateral frameworks that Indonesia is keen on joining. We have joined the BRICS organization, OECD, we have signaled our intent to participate as well, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization even, similar to India, right? So again, ASEAN is the bedrock by which we build our foundation, build our edifice, but it is not where our maritime diplomacy ends. And ASEAN has expanded as an organization so since 1967, so from 5 member states, so Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, and the Philippines, right? So there were 5 founding member states, and now we have 11 member states with the formal inclusion of Timor-Leste just a few days ago, right? And again, this morning, we hear PNG as a potential candidate of an ASEAN member. So perhaps in a similar way to the way we understand Indo-Pacific, Asia-Pacific, the way we understand Southeast Asia may change, you know. If previously Southeast Asia is limited at the far eastern part of Indonesia, now if PNG joins ASEAN, then Southeast Asia extends further east. So again, this is an exercise in political geography that ASEAN is also doing. And the focus of ASEAN has been building not just confidence among its member states, not just cooperation among member states, but the focus now is how we build community of nations. So we want to prioritize our people-to-people relations. We want to build one Southeast Asian community using 3 pillars: political and security pillars, in which we ensure peaceful settlement and management of disputes. We can talk about Thailand and Cambodia, how that defines this principle later. Economic community and socio-cultural community, right? And in terms of maritime focus, ASEAN has published its first Maritime Outlook in 2023 and looks forward to publishing another edition next year. So it is a triennial, every 3-year publication, which outlines ASEAN priorities, interests, and challenges, right, when it comes to managing the maritime domain. And this year, a few months ago, it released the ASEAN Vision 2045, basically trying to express our aspirations for a peaceful, stable, secure, inclusive, and resilient region. So all these documents are available online, and I strongly recommend you to have a look and try to understand why ASEAN has come this far to engage in these initiatives and commitments. So the Indian Ocean features preeminently in the way ASEAN manage or creates its initiatives. I think it also reflects Indonesia's interests and concerns as well. So if we remember early this century, there was an Indian Ocean tsunami that affected many countries in the region, including India. And Indonesia was one of the most heavily affected. Hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. But also there is also man-made issues such as piracy. And Indonesia was also a victim of this these challenges, right? And Indonesia had to deploy a naval task force to the Western Indian Ocean for the first time, right? So it's a national task force to help secure and release the hostages taken from an Indonesian ship. So again, Indian Oceans feature very importantly in Indonesian foreign policy, but sometimes we are taken aback by events, right? I think this is the problem that many countries also face, that the way we think about the problems is perhaps a bit slower than how the trends evolve. So I think this is where the cooperation and collaboration is necessary, so we can anticipate and not just react to those challenges. And this is why Indonesia has been present with the Indian Ocean Rim Association since its inception in 1997, right? And in 2017, Indonesia chaired the IORA and organized the first ever IORA summit. And I think the last Secretary General of IORA was also an Indonesian diplomat. So there is so much that IORA can do, and one of which is the management of marine debris, and under Indonesian under the Secretary Generalship of Ambassador Salman, IORA released a strategic framework of action on marine debris. But again, IORA is a very large organization, a lot of interests, a lot of member states, many member states with different priorities. So I think it works in a similar way to ASEAN, in which consensus can be quite hard to achieve, right? And ASEAN now has 11 member states, and IORA has 20 plus member states. So I think it's a tremendous challenge to find consensus. But there are overlaps, there are similarity of interest and outlooks where we can build upon to engage in cooperative activities, right, such as marine pollution. Indian Ocean Navy Symposium, it's an important platform for Indonesia to build confidence with other regional navies. Again, we are not just talking about confidence building, but also capacity building and capability enhancements. So IONS has also made strides in recent years. I think in 2022, it held its first ever IONS maritime exercise, and it is going to be regular. It also has, similar to IORA, it has a few working groups. It works on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. It's going to formulate the HADR guidelines. I don't know if it has been adopted, but I think this is a good initiative for its member navies to adopt. Maritime security, counter-piracy is a very serious issue in the Indian Ocean. Although it has been better recently, but again, I think IONS can also not follow, but can also adapt into the way ASEAN works. I think in the Indian Ocean, it needs to be more centrality, to be more central. So when we talk about ASEAN centrality, I think in the Indian Ocean, we should also talk about IORA centrality. We should also talk about IONS centrality. And there are so many unilateral initiatives in the Indian Ocean, but I think, to promote a multilateral regionalism, I think this initiative should be centralized into IONS, right? Again, I think we did talk about counter-piracy task force, naval operations. I think IONS should take the lead in this. I think this is also what Indonesia desires to see. Finally, the ASEAN Outlook on the Indo-Pacific, it was released in June 2019. So it encompasses 4 main pillars: maritime cooperation, connectivity, UN Sustainable Development Goals 2030, economic and other possible areas of cooperation. So again, the significance of AOIP is that it is the first time that ASEAN adopts Indo-Pacific as a strategic construct, right? And so this is unprecedented because, again, some critics say that this is ASEAN response to the emergence of many Indo-Pacific initiatives outside of ASEAN. So in order to return the centrality of ASEAN, ASEAN has to do more. Yeah. So this is quite an achievement for ASEAN to have AOIP, precisely because China is also on board. Right. Previously, China opposes the framework of Indo-Pacific. They say it's, in a conversation with a senior Chinese diplomat, it's a revisionism because we are, China is used to the expression Asia-Pacific, and now it's Indo-Pacific, right? But, with AOIP, China supports the framework of the use of this strategic framework. But IOIP is also important because it does not replace any existing Indo-Pacific initiatives. So we have free and open Indo-Pacific, and with India, Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative. So IOIP does not compete, does not seek to replace any of them, but it wants to align. It wants to synergize all these initiatives in an inclusive manner, right? And the use of the word Indo-Pacific, as I said, China is already on board. It softens the edges. It doesn't want anyone to feel cornered by the use of this framework. But however, AOIP is also realistic, I think. In its statement, it mentions about the existence of geopolitical challenges, including maritime disputes. that can create tensions. So ASEAN, in this case, has been negotiating a code of conduct with China on the South China Sea and trying to implement the 2002 Declaration of Conduct. So the code of conduct has reached its third reading, and what Indonesia, what I do not want to see is a code of conduct that just going to be the same state as the DOC in 2002, right? It's only diplomatic declarations without any specific actions how to peacefully manage South China Sea disputes. So I think this is a long process. There are so many thoughts about how the COC negotiation should be brought forward. I think the problematic one is the one that thinks the COC as a communication channel in an open-minded manner with China, right? Because it takes so long for the COC to conclude that it just becomes another confidence-building mechanism with China, between ASEAN and China. So that is, I think, it's the lowest bar that the COC negotiations can have. And certainly, you know, as far as Indonesia is concerned, it wants a legally binding COC where all claimants, so Indonesia is not claimant, I have to make this clear, Indonesia is not claimant, but all parties, you know, ASEAN and China will refrain from the use of both armed and unarmed force in order to manage the disputes. ASEAN, I think it has already mentioned that ASEAN and IORA have agreed on a memorandum of understanding in 2023. And we look forward to greater collaboration between the two large organizations. And again, ASEAN tries to operationalize the Outlook, AOIP, from a defense perspective. So basically it, again, re-emphasizes the consensus, unanimous consensus of all ASEAN member states while doing initiatives with external powers. So I think on the first day we are talking about how India and ASEAN can collaborate more. So it cannot be just an Indonesia-India thing. It has to be agreed upon by the other ASEAN member states, then we can collaborate together. So it encompasses three main pillars of activities. Number one is dialogue. Second is exercise. I think India and ASEAN have done this quite a lot. Education, training, military science, and technology research. And with ASEAN, we work with consensus, and a lot of this diplomatic language is quite broad. And it is up to the member states to define and operationalize those terms, right? So what do we mean by dialogue? What do we mean by exercise? Again. And I see there are synergy and parallels between the three organizations. I think there are four binding threads that unite them all. Number one is maritime safety and security. All emphasize the importance of peaceful, not just peaceful settlement of disputes, but also peaceful management of disputes. How is this going to be operationalized? Again, it depends on the member states. It depends on the issues at hand. For ASEAN, I think it remains on the COC. So ASEAN, unfortunately, is not unanimous on the use of international arbitration, such as the steps taken by the Philippines against China back in 2016. And unfortunately, so in the last year of Indonesian chairmanship, in the last month of Indonesian chairmanship, I think it was December 2016, there was a statement on ASEAN, guideline on ASEAN maritime stability, right? The problem is it mentions the DOC, the importance of implementing DOC, the importance of continuing negotiations on COC, importance of dialogue, confidence building measure, but it doesn't mention international arbitration as one of the key ways to resolve maritime disputes. And despite Indonesia has also used this avenue. Second, I think the other three, they are quite already familiar. maritime and blue economy. So ASEAN also wants to improve connectivity, not just among its members, but also dialogue partners with the ASEAN, including through the ASEAN Master Plan on connectivity, maritime environmental protection and disaster management. Again, Indonesia is located along the Pacific Ring of Fire. It is susceptible to natural disasters. So this is an important priority for Indonesia. And finally, marine science collaboration. I think what the previous speaker said about marine science collaboration, scientific collaboration, trying to find the linkage between maritime crimes on the one hand, and then the geographical enabler of those crimes is also a very important aspect of this collaboration. Please let me also take this opportunity to talk about initiatives and cooperation beyond those ASEAN, IONS, and IORA, especially when we have this theme of capacity building and capability advancements. So number one is, if you read the news in recent days, there is a significant enhancement in India-ASEAN engagement. So next year, we will have a ASEAN-India Year of Maritime Cooperation, and we look forward to hosting the second ASEAN-India Maritime Exercise. Let me also take this opportunity to suggest that perhaps next year we can have a mini IPRD, India or ASEAN-India Maritime Dialogue track 1.5, right? To support these initiatives. Yesterday we discussed about the greater collaboration with BIMSTEC, so BIMSTEC ASEAN engagement. Okay, I'm running out of time. Just two more. White shipping monitoring is a priority that Indonesia is also concerned about. And this has been reflected in Indonesian President Prabowo's joint statement with Prime Minister Modi earlier this year. Perhaps we also can think about joint patrols in high seas areas of the Bay of Bengal between the littoral countries, right? So this is also to put some momentum into IONS, especially in the Eastern Indian Ocean area. Trilateralism, Admiral Chauhan has mentioned earlier, Australia, India, and Indonesia, some potential areas for collaboration, submarine, subsea infrastructure security, not just submarine cables, submarine rescue and safety, and I think this is a priority for Indonesia too. We lost a submarine back in 2021, and we are looking forward to acquire a submarine rescue ship. Perhaps, in the absence of that rescue ship, we still rely on our partners, especially Australia and India, who has that capacity. Hydrographic and oceanographic research. And finally, in the bilateral level, India and Indonesia can also expand collaboration through exchanges and fellowships. And I think it is time for Indonesia and India to establish an India-Indonesia Center or India-Indonesia Institute to promote bilateral relations. Just to summarize, so Indonesia is a two-ocean archipelago, right? So it has a long coastline in the Indian Ocean as well. And it pushes AOIP because it recognizes that these two oceans, although they are separate geographical areas, they are connected together. And we see there is much synergy between IORA, IONS, and IOIP. However, my concern is that diversity of memberships may present challenges to consensus building and cohesion, just like ASEAN. So in place of this wide-ranging multilateralism, I think this is where bilateral, trilateral, and unilateral initiatives can fill the gap. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Supriyanto, for your informative presentation. Your insights about the unique Indonesia's approach are well noted. May I now request Sylvia Malenbaum to take the floor. The floor is yours.
Okay, good evening to all. Ab Sapko, Namaskar. I'm very pleased to be here. It's my first IPR dialogue, so I just want to thank Admiral Chauhan for inviting me. And by the same occasion, to thank all the organizers for the wonderful event. I know that, I have to confess that this topic was a bit challenging. And before coming to the question, I want to provide some context. Because to understand France's perspective on these three entities, it's important first to understand the French vision in the Indian Ocean. So on day one, you already had clear explanation of Admiral Culler regarding the French Indo-Pacific strategy. And on the previous session, Madame Marianne Perron explained also the specificity of this French Indo-Pacific strategy in the Pacific region. So I hope tonight you will leave the conference with a very clear view of what France is doing in the Indo-Pacific. Okay, so this first slide, you see, I think it's very well known now that France considers itself as a nation of the Indo-Pacific, thanks to its overseas territories. So you see here La Réunion, Mayotte, but also the French Southern and Antarctic territories. So the one you can see the name of the map is called the Kerguelen Islands. But interestingly, we released an updated version of our Indo-Pacific strategy in July 2025. And I would say this new version emphasizes the centrality of these overseas territories because there was some discontent before in the previous versions, and these territories consider that the previous strategy was not inclusive enough. So the core priority now is really to empower those territories as active regional players. And maybe another dimension of the distinctiveness of French Indo-Pacific strategy is geopolitical. So France really asserts its independence as a singular voice and refuses to align with any bloc power or to accept a world divided into spheres of influence. But more interestingly, I think France's overseas territories give it direct sovereignty interest in the region. So I would say the first one is to protect the 1 million French citizens living in the Indian Ocean, but also defending its territories and the vast exclusive economic zone. So France has the second largest EEZ in the world to secure for sure the supply chains and the communication routes, and of course to contribute to regional stability. So in short, France's primary role in the region is a security role. And this primary role as security is reflected in our military presence. So we have about 4,350 military staff and a military structure that is divided into two distinct zones that reflects that the French view of the Indian Ocean is not a single unified area. So we have two distinct commands, a sovereignty force, again, sovereignty referring to the territories and the French citizens there, that is based in Réunion Island, so the Fazoy, and presence forces in Djibouti and the United Arab Emirates. So I think it has been mentioned during the conference, but there is an increasing number of threats right now in the southwestern part of the Indian Ocean. So the situation in the Red Sea has led to a doubling of traffic around the Cape of Good Hope, and significantly more shipments now pass through the Mozambique channel. So, of course, as it was mentioned by French officer, the Southwest Indian Ocean is no longer at the periphery of global stakes. This surge significantly increased the risk of marine pollution, accident, environmental damage, broader maritime security concern. Also, there is this question of illegal fishing, but I don't want to make Mr. Mohabeer angry, so I will not talk about illegal fishing, but yet it remains for sure a very major challenge. Rising drug trafficking also is another challenge with these small islands increasingly used as transshipment hubs. And additionally, I will mention the illicit migrant trafficking, that is a growing concern, with new flows emerging from East Africa towards Mayotte as well. And as you all know, the small islands of the Indian Ocean are also highly vulnerable to climate change. For example, the Epars Islands are considered as a biodiversity hotspot, which makes their protection for sure very critical. Yeah, thank you. But our vision of the Indian Ocean is not limited to a single region. France also aims to be a credible power in the Indo-Pacific. We defend an open, secure, inclusive Indo-Pacific based on international law. One good example of this commitment is the Mission Clemenceau 2025 with our French carrier strike group that has been deployed during 5 months, so from the Mediterranean Sea to the Pacific Ocean, going up to the Philippine Sea. But France alone cannot act in such a vast area. We have limited resources as well. So the question of partnerships is also at the heart of the approach. In the last Indo-Pacific French strategy, we're talking about sovereignty partnership. So this concept means partnerships based on mutual respect for sovereignty and shared strategic interest. And one very good example, for sure, it's not working. One good example is the French-Indian partnership, which is based on this very shared commitment of both countries' strategic autonomies. So it is really a prime example of this concept, again, of sovereignty partnership. So usually when you think about the French-Indo partnership that has been elevated more than 25 years back to the strategic level, we think about defense cooperation. And for sure, there is defense cooperation, especially there is naval cooperation. We are running the Varuna exercise since 1983. So the Varuna is so well known, especially here, so it needs no further presentation. We have also regular port calls in our respective ports. Recently, again, the Indian Navy ships at the port call in Réunion Island. But we have also other areas of cooperation, for example, the space cooperation that is important. I think the space cooperation between France and India was among the very first space partnership in the world. And we have already developed several joint satellites, and we have a project of a joint maritime surveillance satellite system focused on the Indian Ocean. So this strategic cooperation is embodied in a common vision, the Indo-French roadmap for the Indo-Pacific that was adopted in 2023, and that again formalized our approach in all these strategic areas. Beyond this partnership, this bilateral partnership of sovereignty, multilateralism, it's again also at the very cornerstone of our approach. So France is an active member of many regional organizations in the Indian Ocean, more broadly in the Pacific as well. Here you have mapping, it's not exhaustive. So I think France was one of the first countries to really recognize the importance of regional multilateral cooperation. You have, for example, I mean, it was one of the founders of the Indian Ocean Commission in 1986. And since, interestingly, it's increasing, strengthening its engagement within Indian Ocean, it became a full member of the IORA in 2021. It joined the Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, the IPOI, the same year, and will hold the presidency of the IOC next year, so from 2026 to 2027. And last but not least, France is also a full member of the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium. But importantly, I also want to highlight the role of the EU, because it's important to understand that once again, given limited resources, France also closely works with the EU in the Indian Ocean. It has also strongly encouraged the EU to develop its own Indo-Pacific strategy, a goal that has now been achieved. So it was released in 2021. So the EU plays a significant role, providing strong support across major initiatives. So you have, for example, the Maritime Security Project, the MAS project, and it has now involved into the Safe Seas Africa, so since 2024. Also to mention two initiatives that also contribute to building this regional maritime security architecture we were talking earlier, involving so the IOC and two East African countries, Kenya and Djibouti. So in this regard, the EU has financed key operational coordination structure, so the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center in Madagascar and the Regional Coordination Operation Center in the Seychelles. Let's now focus on IOC, IORA, and IONS. So interestingly, France is amongst the three countries, like alongside Seychelles and Mauritius, that has the particularity of belonging to all three organizations. So France is an active member of the three organizations. You can see here, France has already conducted a series of initiatives through the three of this organization. But I would say there are two main differences between the three entities. The first one is a difference of nature. The IOC and IORA are primarily political and diplomatic in character, whereas the IONS bring together regional navy. So the IONS mainly discuss at the technical, tactical, even doctrinal level rather than political. Second difference for me, it's a geographical difference. The IOC is much smaller in scale. I'm sorry this map is in French. I mean, the legend is in French. But yet you can see the IOC country in red and the IORA countries in orange. So the IOC is a sub-regional organization with 5 full members, meaning that they can really have a strong and coherent identity. The organization, for example, is largely francophone, so we speak French. That's an important part of the identity. There are some elements shared in terms of history, culture, and this is important because this coherence enables the IOC to focus on common priority and common threats. For example, all IOC members are islands, so the question of food security is important. You know that they are trying now to reduce dependency on some distant imports that are expensive, that create inflation. So for example, enhancing intra-regional trade is an important dimension of this organization, and developing as well a regional value chain. The question of resilience to climate change, biodiversity, protection are also very crucial. Again, they are very vulnerable as they are islands. By contrast, the IORA is bringing together 23 members. So it is much more complicated to achieve such coordination, such cohesion, but the IORA has the merit to be the very first organization to bring together almost all the coastal countries of the Indian Ocean. So it's created a platform of dialogue that is also very, very crucial. So my first recommendation here is would be to leverage the Indo-French partnership as I explained, we have already a very strong partnership, a strong experience of cooperation between France and India. And interestingly, we have a momentum ahead. In 2026-2027, France will hold the IOC presidency, and India will simultaneously chair both IORA and IONS. So this alignment creates a very unique opportunity for France and India to drive stronger coordination among these three frameworks. So, for example, this could be a good idea, I think, to put this question of synergies between the three entities on the French-Indian bilateral agenda for the 2 years to come. As we say, old couple always needs new challenges. Also, France and India are very both strong advocates of regional cooperation. France is a founding member of IOC. I think it's 40% of IOC fundings coming from France. And also it supports IORA, to which it has provided recently, for example, financial backing through French Agency of Development. So maybe it's the economist in me speaking, but I think that when you put money on the table, it demonstrates kind of commitment. Also, France has already promoted greater coordination between IORA and the IOC, that's the position. Again, it has been said, but that two organizations, even if their mandates is a bit different, share strategic priorities: maritime security, climate action, biodiversity, blue economy. And for example, during French IOC presidency in 2021-2022, an MOU was signed between the two organizations. More recently, France and the EU partnered with IORA to organize a high-level workshop on natural disaster management in Réunion. I think it was in October 2025. So definitely, I think the leveraging the Indo-French partnership could boost the synergies between the three entities. And I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you for providing a perspective on the centrality of the overseas French territories in the Indo-Pacific strategy, as well as your commitment of France to the regional multilateral cooperation framework. May I now request Grace Fuller to take the floor? Thank you.
Namaste and good afternoon. I'm thrilled to be here today to talk about IONS, IORA, the IOC, and the AOIP. It's a lot of acronyms, which I apologize for, but I promise it'll be a short and sharp presentation. And on that note, I would say I apologize for not having a background presentation as my more organized and smarter colleagues have done. But I've tried my hand at draping my own sari, so I like to think that I have a bit of a competitive edge in that regard. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the very hard work of the National Maritime Foundation in pulling together another great event. It's something the Australian High Commission looks forward to every year. I want to start today's discussion with some framing comments on the larger Indo-Pacific maritime context and offer thoughts on how today's seminar feeds into the bigger picture. Many have said that the Indo-Pacific has an undefined scope. That is, of course, true to a degree, so I'd offer you all a uniquely Australian definition that is rooted in geography and perspective. Australia is an island country and a standalone continent. Oceans are fundamentally what defines our place in the world. And it is our unique geographical position at the fulcrum of the Pacific and Indian Oceans that made Australia one of the early adopters of the term Indo-Pacific. Australia's 2013 Defence White Paper brought the term into our official lexicon, defining the Indo-Pacific as the strategic arc that connects the Indian and Pacific Oceans through Southeast Asia. The regional architecture that we are here today to discuss, be it the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, the Indian Ocean Rim Association, and the Indian Ocean Commission, all of course have a unique Indian Ocean focus. But for Australia, the Indian Ocean has not always received the same level of attention in our strategic thinking. Many have forgotten that the 1914 Anzac convoy, the first of many, sailed across the Indian Ocean to Europe. And in the Second World War, the Indian Ocean campaign was a critical part of the Allied effort. Yet despite that, Australia has tended to see itself as a Pacific Ocean state. It was not until 1987 that Australia adopted a two-ocean navy policy, prompting a significant reposturing of Australia forces to Western Australia. Today, up to half of our Navy fleet is based permanently in Western Australia, including all 6 of our Collins-class submarines. Our equities in the Indian Ocean are very clear. Approximately 42% of our exports by value depart from Western Australia. Our exclusive economic zone extends deep into the Indian Ocean, containing the strategically valuable territories of Christmas and Cocos Keeling Islands. The Indian Ocean is also home to Australia's top 15 trading partners: India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and Thailand. For 70 years, Australians have reaped the economic and security benefits of a benign security environment in the Indian Ocean. But that strategic landscape is shifting rapidly. We are living through the biggest realignment of the geopolitical landscape since World War II. Like the Pacific, the Indian Ocean is increasingly characterized by rising strategic competition and intensifying great power rivalries. Our institutions and our multilateral fora, the very ones that we are here today to discuss, are under immense pressure. So against this backdrop of rising opportunity and increasing risk, how can we leverage our regional architecture to help protect and to sustain a stable Indo-Pacific region? As most in this room all too well, there can be a temptation to focus heavily on Beijing and Washington and on the tensions between these two powers. The US-China relationship is, of course, among the most important in the Indo-Pacific because relations between those two powers have the potential to set the tone for cooperation or for competition. But bilateral relations don't exist in a vacuum. And if we focus solely on US-China strategic competition or on difficulties in the US-China relationship, we miss a crucial insight. That it is not just China or the US or Australia or any country that sets the strategic dynamic of our region. A strong web of regional architecture will promote dialogue, trust, and understanding, and will better equip the region to deal with political and security challenges. The Indian Ocean Rim Association will remain important for strengthening consultation and reinforcing rules-based habits. The Indian Ocean Naval Symposium can help forge cooperation on maritime security challenges like terrorism, transnational crime, illegal fishing, trade, and climate change. Collaboration to improve maritime domain awareness is a key focus for Australia. We cannot moderate behaviour in our region without being able to monitor and track what is occurring. A decade ago, the search for Malaysian Airlines flight MH370 demonstrated how little we know about what goes on in the Indian Ocean. We need to understand what is occurring in the Indian Ocean by collecting information on movements above and below its surface. But of course, Australia cannot build this picture alone. We need to increase information sharing with our key partners. And Australia, of course, welcomes India's leadership in this regard. The establishment of an information fusion centre for the Indian Ocean region continues to help shed light on areas currently unseen. But without credible military capability, the efficacy of diplomacy is diminished. It's important here to recognise that our regional bodies and architecture play a crucial role, but so too does our military capability and our defence personnel. Investing in a capable and potent defence force, one that can provide credible deterrence and withstand and counter coercion, is an integral part of our balancing equation. Straddled across 3 oceans, the Australian Defence Force needs to be in more places at the same time, because the defence of Australia is intimately connected with the peace and stability of the Pacific, the peace and stability of Southeast Asia, of Northeast Asia, and of the Northeast Indian Ocean. And so when we think about the kind of defence force that we need to meet for this strategic moment, it is all about capabilities that project. It means a much more capable set of northern bases in Australia, which can send our Air Force further. It means a much greater cyber capability. It means a much more capable surface fleet, including Australia's acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines. It means a more mobile and a more amphibious army. It means longer-range missiles. Developing military capability has its place. In Australia's case, our annual defence spending will almost double over the coming decade to $100 billion, around 2.4% of our GDP. In addition to our individual capabilities, all nations need to invest in a form of collective deterrence. We cannot just appeal to great powers to conduct strategic competition responsibly. That is too passive. So to contest and prepare for the challenges ahead, we need to utilise the full extent of our strategic toolkit of defence partnerships, of alliances and groupings. And when I say this, it is more than just words. I promise that it is backed up by practical action. As an example, in 2023, India and Australia and Indonesia conducted a maritime passage exercise together. I personally hope to see more of this trilateral cooperation. There is no stronger signal than 3 Indian Ocean partners working together to promote regional stability and economic prosperity. Earlier this month, I accompanied Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on his first ever visit to Australia, and partnership was a key theme during his visit. India and Australia train together, plan together, share information and share capability. India's inaugural participation in Australia's exercise Talisman Sabre just a few months ago exemplifies our growing strategic convergence. And in the last decade, we have more than tripled our annual defence exercises, meetings and activities. We've now conducted more than 10 maritime patrol aircraft deployments to and from each other's territories. Importantly, our maritime cooperation sends a message to our region and to our competitors that India and Australia and our partners will work together to protect vulnerable maritime choke points and shape the strategic trajectory of the Indo-Pacific. And so Australia is deeply investing in our network of regional strategic partnerships. Countries that can best pool their resources and combine their strengths will have the decisive advantage. Former Foreign Minister Marsudi of Indonesia has said, "We all have our differences, but it's up to us to either use these differences as a dividing force or turn them into strengths that enrich our collective efforts." Leveraging our strengths into a collective effort is needed now more than ever. And without more active diplomacy, the risk of military capabilities being called into service becomes even greater. For Australia, that means going beyond the lip service of wanting to just do more. In the last 2 years, we have opened up new consulates and posts in Bangalore, Kolkata, and Malé. We are strengthening our existing formal alliances with the United States and New Zealand and growing other partnerships, partnerships that build confidence and create choices. Australia is building our trilateral initiatives with India and Indonesia and India and France to coordinate on our shared interests in the Indian Ocean. We are deepening our economic and security partnerships with Japan and India, as well as the Republic of Korea, the United Kingdom, France, and of course countries of Southeast Asia. But most fundamentally, Australia believes in the importance of regional institutions, including the architecture that binds the region from ocean to ocean. So that is ASEAN, the Pacific Islands Forum, and the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Our commitment to these bodies is not new. Australia was the first non-member to establish formal relationships with ASEAN, ASEAN's first dialogue partner. And we are founding members of both the Pacific Islands Forum and the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Our collective efforts and resources have aimed to respond to the region's needs and priorities. So I promised I would keep it short, and I will finish my talk here today to recognise that Australia's partnership with India, the largest economy of this region, is central to our efforts to build a peaceful, safe, and prosperous Indian Ocean region. The example that India sets as a regional leader is essential to our collective efforts to uphold sovereignty and the rules of the road. To respond to the challenges ahead, we need to work with partners across the region and across the globe. The Indian Ocean is one of three oceans that surrounds our nation. Building our links and capability in the Indian Ocean will, of course, be crucial to our collective security. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Grace, for providing us an overview of the evolution of Australia's thinking on the maritime domain, as well as the importance that Australia has attached to collaboration and partnership, as well as new initiatives, including trilateral initiatives and membership of regional institutions. We are really short of time, and I definitely would like to have a few questions being posed to our panel members. I have just about 15 minutes to do that question answer session. So may I invite questions? Please raise your hand from the audience. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. My name is Ayush Bhardwaj, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask questions. I think it's going to be my 5th question in the IPRD, so thank you so much. So, sir, my question is to the whole panel. So, as we are aware of the fact that about the overlapping mandates among IORA, IOC, and IONS, sir, what institutional design, either it can be functional merger, interoperability charter, or a fused analytics cell can generate a unified Indian Ocean security architecture which is capable of predictive threat assessment or coordinated enforcement? Thank you so much, sir.
I will take 3 questions, and then we'll sort of pass it on to the panel. I don't see any other hands, so is there someone? Yeah, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kajal from University of Delhi, a research scholar. And my question is to Mr. Supriyanto, and anyone else can answer. What role the academic research collaborations can play in bridging policy gaps among IONS, IORA, IOC, and how these collaboration efforts can be translated into actionable frameworks that influence real-time decision-making? Thank you.
I don't see any other question. Now, I'll start off with the question on the overlapping mandates which have been pointed out. Can I request Raj to start off with providing his perspective on this issue?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think there is no overlapping mandate. It's not that. IORA has its objectives, its mandate. The themes are similar: maritime security. IOC is establishing a concrete, actionable process, which IORA will not do. Because IORA, in terms of actions, it's led by the countries. Now, IONS is an annual event where there is a symposium. So the issue doesn't rise. That's why what I'm suggesting is that we have to see to it that each of us, each of the three, reinforces each other based on our mandates, but also on the complementarity that we have. So as I said, let me take another example. We had a discussion on cable security. Now, what I believe is most important about cable security, subsea cable, is that, according to me, all the cables in the whole world are private owned. So if it's private owned, who's in charge for its security? What we need is to have a framework for cable security. Now that framework cannot be at national level. At IOC, in 2021, we endorsed a regional framework for cable security. It still doesn't make sense because all the cables that comes in the IOC region they all come from elsewhere. So it would make a sense that the whole of the Indian Ocean and even the world establishes a framework for cable security. This is what is in our plan. Now, in concrete terms, what can we do? We have already worked out, and my intention is next year to organize a ministerial conference on this. I'll talk to the SG of IORA to mobilize all the members of IORA on that. Can we hold technical discussions together? When IONS symposium is organized, can we put it on the table, discuss it, why it is an issue, what is that we can do, what is that we can't do, and eventually we all contribute to see to it at the end of the day, you have a Indian Ocean or global framework for cable security, for example. So that was the kind of things I think. So for me, there is no issue of overlapping mandates. You know, all these organizations were established for particular reasons at that time. For example, IOC was an expression of a group of non-allied countries, it was much more politically motivated by Mauritius, Seychelles, and Madagascar to establish IOC. So the mandates evolved, but there is no issue about overlapping mandates. And the other thing I prefer to avoid, let's not discuss that we go and try to harmonize IORA, IOC, etc. It's waste of time. We will put so much of energy and discussions that, and I can tell you, I can write it, give you, that at the end the result would be, sorry, we can't go further on that one. So let's focus on the end objective of the themes of the issues for which we are trying to work, all the three of us. Okay, same objectives, fine. How can each of us contribute to achieve? And I think I responded also the second question, what is that we could do? What the NMF could do, for example. I raised a few issues. I said, for example, okay, can we do some research on hotspots in the whole of the Indian Ocean? Or can we try to understand why is it that my own country, for the last 30 years, have shot only 7 IU fishers? But every year, highest level, people go, IU fishing, IU fishing. So why don't we analyze? So NMF, can you, for example, study these? What are the real issues that prevents to address those problems to which we are constantly facing? And the other point I would like to tell you that our analysis shows that without exception, all the various threats, maritime security threats and challenges, all are worsening with time, except that piracy is under control, thanks to India, third quarter of 2023 and beginning 2024. But then all the rest, since Wakasho, for example, there were 8 incidents and 2 led to some oil pollution in Mauritian waters, though not big ones. What I'm saying is that the issues, while we keep on talking, negotiating for decades, the real issues remain. Let's focus on that.
Thank you very much. Will someone else like to take a call? I think it's a very comprehensive answer which has been provided on the subject, and I would completely endorse as an head of an organization that there is no issue of overlapping mandates. And I have heard several times the issue of sort of avoid duplication in your activities, synergize, etc. And that is one of the topics which is sort of we are asked to address. I believe the cost involved in synergizing is much greater than the benefits that you will get out of doing some sort of a synergy in the activities of various regional organizations. There is going to be some duplication which will occur, but most of the time the actual work which you do are somewhat distinct. So while you may say that it falls under a particular rubric or a certain paradigm, but in real terms, the benefits are different, the way it is organized is different, and I still see usefulness in doing certain things. Just to give you an example, like for example, we keep on doing workshops on, let's say, disaster risk management, which was just referred to. It was held in La Réunion last week. Now, I noticed that the participants in this workshop from the 23 member states were different from the one which we had done about 8-10 months back. Now, they are part of their disaster management institutes or departments or ministries, but the personnel keep on shifting and they almost start from scratch in terms of trying to understand the processes and the resources that are available to address disaster risk in their countries. I will stop over there. If anyone else wants to address, will you like to, yep, okay, go ahead. Make it brief, please, because we just have about 6 minutes.
I have two questions actually addressed to me. So number one is on the overlap. I think this is one of the criticisms leveled at ASEAN as well. I agree with Mr. Raj Mohabeer that, again, the criticisms about overlaps is inefficiencies, duplication of efforts, redundancy. I think the way ASEAN pitch the different regional bodies, right? They cater for a certain audience, for a certain group of activities. So, for example, we have had the ASEAN Regional Forum, established in 1990s. It has intersessional meeting on maritime security, but it is foreign ministry led, and the member states are far encompassing the ASEAN plus 10 or that we have in the East Asia Summit. For instance, Mongolia is there. North Korea is also a member of ASEAN Regional Forum. So we have channels of communications in which other regional bodies of ASEAN do not. So on ADEM Plus, we have ADEM Plus working group on maritime security that is defense ministry led, and it is doing very practical and operational initiatives. And now we have ASEAN Maritime Forum and the expanded ASEAN Maritime Forum, which discuss more about non-security aspects, more into blue economy. And don't forget, there is also the ASEAN Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, also has a similar body doing on maritime security. So I think it depends on how you pitch or how you understand overlapping. In this case, of course, they are all talking about maritime domain, maritime issues, but the issues are different. The membership is different, right? And to the second question about academic, I think, and this is also applies to ASEAN, I think academic has three fundamental advantages. I can say advantages. Number one is freedom from political baggage. As I said, when I address this chamber, I represent myself, I do not represent my government. Secondly is liberty of time to do research on a particular topic. I think, when I stay in Delhi for a year and just try to speak Hindi all the time, I will be speaking Hindi. I will be conversational in Hindi. So I think the liberty of time is something that researchers, scholars can have. And finally, I think network with policymakers is also important. I think, with freedom from political package, I think we can network with any policymakers and try to advocate certain policies based on our discussions, based on our cooperation, based on our dialogues with other researchers from other countries, free from any political baggage. I think this is what ASEAN has been doing with its Track 2 networks. So, for instance, in IRF, ASEAN Regular Forum, there is CISCAP, right, which submits a number of memoranda over the years, a lot on maritime security issues. And now with ADMM too, we have the network of ASEAN defense think tanks, network of ASEAN defense institutes. So basically Track 2 grouping and trying to brainstorm ideas and suggest policy recommendations to policymakers when they meet at the Track 1 level, the ASEAN Defense Ministerial meeting, and also the IDMM Plus level. So again, academics is part and parcel of the ASEAN regional security architecture, I might say, precisely because of what they are. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We are nearing the end, and it's the job of the moderator to summarize in the next 2 minutes. And let me profoundly thank all the 4 speakers for their excellent contributions to the subject which we were dealing, and each one of them has brought a valuable and a unique perspective from IOC, IORA, AOIP, IONS dimensions, and they provide a rich understanding of how these frameworks can complement each other, how they can help us in shaping a secure and prosperous Indo-Pacific. The diversity of the views also, in a sense, reflects the shared commitment and to make the Indo-Pacific more secure, stable, and prosperous. With these words, I would like to also thank the questions which were posed from the floor of this hall. And being the last session of the day, I wish you all the best, and I want to thank the organizers for all the excellent arrangements that were made for the conduct of the 3-day of this dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to announce the release of the final volume of the NMF's annual publication series, entitled Maritime Perspectives 2025, Maritime Security and Multilateral Constructs. It is edited by Vice Admiral Pradeep Chauhan, DG NMF, and Ms. Anam Khan, Associate Fellow at the NMF. I now request the Deputy Chief of the Naval Staff, Vice Admiral Tarun Sopti, UYSM, AVSM, VSM, to join us on stage for the ceremony. This volume, ladies and gentlemen, traces the evolution of maritime security from being a matter exclusive to the state to becoming something that is evolving into a shared responsibility in multilateral constructs. Underscoring the importance of collective efforts, this work contextualizes the addressal of maritime threats to a more unified approach. With those words, I now hand over to the panelists. I request everyone on stage to kindly do the honors. I request our dignitaries to remain on stage, as I now request Admiral Sopti to present tokens of our appreciation to all our panelists. Mr. Raj Mohabeer. Mr. Ristian Suprianto. His Excellency Mr. Sanjiv Ranjan. Miss Sylvia Malin-Boom. And Ms. Grace Fuller. I request all dignitaries to gather for a group photograph in front of the tables. With that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking all our dignitaries on stage with a big round of applause.